Hey guys, so it's been a couple of weeks since we had the chance to sit down and catch up about what we're working on, what we're making, what I'm knitting, all of these kinds of things. And so today I want to talk more about knitting socks and also share with you some of the things that happened at Knit City very, very recently. Hey guys, thank you so much for being here. My name is Felicia from Sweet Georgia, and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a space where we come every Friday and we talk about something to do with the fiber arts, whether it's knitting or spinning or weaving or dyeing. Now, last week we did not meet because of a lot of things that are happening in October. So for one, we had Knit City, we had a Knit City Mini, which is a yarn festival that happens every year, but last year it didn't happen, and this year it happened, but in a very mini way. So just like a much scaled down sort of event. So we went there, hosted a booth, had a much smaller booth than we're typically making these days, but just a much, much smaller booth. But it was wonderful and exciting to see people in real life, to meet with people again, to just be in the community with people who also love yarn and love fiber and love knitting. And so that was really, really great to have that weekend to do that. So that was quite a busy weekend. And then right after that weekend, we sort of dropped everything off at the studio, and the very next day we started working with Laura Fry, who had come down to Vancouver to film for the whole week with us. And so we filmed 2 classes with Laura Fry that are going to be weaving classes that we're going to launch on the School of Sweet Georgia in 2022. You will be very, very, very excited to see all of the things that we learned with Laura. So many things that I have to share with you. But we basically spent the entire week filming with her. And so we had no time to make a video. Now, before we talk about socks and knitting socks, I want to share with you a couple of the things that I picked up at Knit City because I thought that they were pretty cool. So every time I go to a yarn festival or a fiber festival, I'm always really curious about seeing what kind of spinning tools there are that are available. I love handmade spindles, beautiful spindles made out of beautiful wood and all this kind of stuff. And I showed you a couple of weeks ago my sort of collection of little spindles that I have enjoyed playing with. And so the first thing I did when I got to Knit City Mini was to kind of like look around really quickly to see who brought spindles and who's making spindles. So the booth right directly across from us, Small Bird Workshop, they were carrying these beautiful spindles that were made by Helen Maudsley. So this is the beautiful spindle that Helen made. This is walnut up here, walnut whorl, black walnut, and cherry for the shaft. So just really a lovely combination. It's like my favorite combination right now. I had previously purchased one of Helen's supported spindles last winter when I was feeling really inspired about doing supported spindling. And so this is the supported spindle that Helen made that I purchased. And this is also, again, walnut. Really, really lovely. So that's the supported spindle, and then this is the little bowl that comes with it. And so the bowl is what you would put your supported spindle in to spin with. So this set of supported spindles and this spindle, they were all made by Helen. And she also sent me this beautiful shawl pin. So this is something that you would use to secure your shawl, your scarf, all of this kind of stuff. And this is really very lovely. It's a lighter wood, might be maple, I'm not entirely sure, but very lovely. And also she sent me this. This is a cherry, I believe it's cherry Nosta pin. And so this is what you would use to wind a center pull ball on. So you can use this one. All beautiful, beautiful wood tools. I love. Sometimes I think that if I wasn't doing yarn things or weaving things, that I would maybe be doing woodworking things, because that whole world really appeals to me as well. I did make a couple of other purchases. And so a couple of weeks ago, we had talked about the fleece auction and going to the fleece auction. And I told you about how Lynn Anderson was the fleece judge at the fleece auction. So Lynn actually has her own business. She has a farm. She raises sheep. She raises CVM sheep. And so her business is called West Coast Color. And so I found her booth where she was selling yarn that was made from her sheep. And so as I was talking to her, she was telling me the names of the sheep, and she says, oh, this is so-and-so, and this is so-and-so. But this is 100% CVM Rommeldale wool, and it's in a beautiful, naturally occurring dark chocolate color. And so I'm thinking about, it's a bit of a thicker yarn, spun sort of woolen, and this is under the label, it's called homegrown. And so it's really stretchy, really bouncy wool. I'm thinking about making just an easy triangle shawl to wear over my shoulders as I work at the computer, something like that. So this one skein could become a very loose and lacy shawlette to wear. Yeah, I think this is going to be really cozy. The other thing is that Lynn also dyes her own fiber as well. And of course we dye our own fiber too, but she dyes this fiber, which is yak and merino. And so we don't have yak and merino and everybody would like to have a little bit of yak and merino in their life. And so this is a beautiful 50 grams of yak and merino fiber, 50-50. She calls this one Karma, but I just really love these colors. I love these colors. And so just a little treat of something to spin. I'm thinking, right now I'm spinning for the study group project, and I have 6 skeins that I'm spinning, all from hand painted colorways. And so I'm working on that one right now, spinning 6 skeins of 3-ply yarn that's going to be worsted. I'm going to knit the night shift shawl, all of that kind of stuff. But then maybe after that, I can just play with this and enjoy the feeling of merino and yak. Nice and soft. So those were just a couple of the things that I purchased. Now let me shift into the sock talk. So last time we met, we were talking about socks and knitting socks from the cuff down, from the top down. And so those socks that I was knitting, I have finished them. I haven't sewn in all of the ends or anything like that, but they are done. You can see they are not identical. They are fraternal socks because they came out of a single sock blank that I had divided in half and all this kind of stuff. But you know, I am enjoying them, and they are going to be lovely. They're going to be really fun to wear. But look at how much yarn I have left over. So with all this yarn that was left over, I thought, well, I should really be knitting Nina some socks. And so I don't know if you've seen yet, but we did recently release a course called Toe Up Socks. Toe Up Socks. So Tabitha, who taught the class on knitting socks from the top down last time, now she's teaching a class about knitting socks from the toe up. And so, because I was working on that course and watching her do these things and watching the videos of her making these, and so I decided to start a pair of socks from the toe up. So you can see here, this is my toe up sock beginning. Ta-da! So I'm just using the leftover sock yarn, and basically what I did was I used Tabitha's class, printed off her measurements form, and then had to measure my daughter's foot, measure Nina's foot, measure the length and all of that kind of stuff. And because I'm not always sure if I am measuring correctly, I also double checked Kate Atherley's book. So she has a book called Custom Fit Socks or Custom Socks, Custom Knit Socks, but it's about socks, and it has all these charts of standard foot measurements. And so I took my measurements of Nina's foot, and then I compared with her table to make sure if I was like, you know, very, very far away from what it should be. But my numbers were pretty reasonable. They're pretty close to what was in the chart, so I went with that and did all the calculations using Tabitha's form to figure out, you know, how many stitches to cast on, how much to knit, all of these kinds of things. And so this is the pattern that I am knitting for Nina's foot. Now, I generally have always knit my socks with magic loop, which is big, long circular needle, and then I fold it in half, and then I knit my socks in the round with magic loop, one long circular. Tabitha really likes to knit with DPNs, so double pointed needles, and so she kind of, as I was working on the videos and looking at, watching all of her toe up videos, I was like, maybe I should really try this DPN thing again. And so it just so happens that Teresa brought a whole bunch of signature needles for us to take to Knit City. And so we brought a whole bunch of signature needles to Knit City, and I thought I should give those a try. So these are the signature needle DPNs. These ones are 2.25 millimeter, or that's, I think, US size 1. We also have the 2.5 millimeter or US size 2. And so those sizes are available as DPNs. I think we have larger DPNs too. I have to check. But these are teeny tiny. And so I'm just getting used to working with a DPN. Now the set comes with 5 needles, but I'm only using 4 because I'm using 1 for one side of my sock, and then I've taken the other sock and I've divided it into 2. And it's part of what Tabitha was talking about in her video. And it kind of gives you a visual indication of where you're at in your sock, so you're not just knitting things in the round and not knowing where the start is, but you kind of have a visual indication that when I have my foot broken into 2 different needles, then I know that this is the top of my foot, and the one that's all on one needle, that's the bottom of my foot. And so I've just been kind of keeping track that way. Now, one thing that is unique about these double pointed needles is that they're designed for knitting socks. And so these DPNs, if you run your nail or your fingernail along the shaft of this needle here, it's got these tiny, tiny, tiny little micro ridges. And the micro ridges sort of help hold the stitches on your needle so that they don't just slide out. Like, it's actually got quite a bit of resistance. So where the tips of the needles are very slippery, they're very sharp, and they're very pointy. And so you're getting a lot of slip on the tip of the needle, but on the shaft of the needle, your stitches are not gonna go anywhere. They're not falling out anywhere. So with using DPNs, I use my method where I'm holding my needle like a pencil. So I hold it sort of I'm holding it in the crook of my hand like so, like that. And then I go about knitting like this. So again, holding my needle like a pencil in this way. Otherwise, I find that if my hand is over, I kind of feel like my hand is too big and it's in the way and all this kind of stuff. So holding it underneath all of the needles, all the needle tips, seems to kind of get my hand out of the way, so I'm not getting in my own way. So these signature needles come with a set of 5. The one that I'm not using, I just keep in the case so that it doesn't impale anyone. These are quite pointy, and so one of the things that I was on the hunt for when I was walking around Knit City was I was looking for some kind of a tool that would hold my project together in my project bag so that I wouldn't hurt myself. If I were to put my hand in the bag and all these super pointy DPNs, I know I'm gonna poke myself and hurt myself. And so I was kind of wandering around Knit City looking for this tool and this device, and I found it at Crafty Jack's. So Katrina's booth, Crafty Jack's, she sells these things, which I didn't even know existed, but they are made by Sukaplaki accessories. Sukaplaki, they are made in Finland. They're called Silmuka Stop. Okay, I guess you couldn't use them for circular projects, but you can use them for DPN projects. So that's what they're designed for. So basically this is a lovely wooden walnut, dark walnut, black walnut, beautiful walnut box. So it's got an opening in there where there's an elastic. And so basically you take the opening and you fit it around your DPNs. And then with the elastic, you just stretch it over to the other side. And now your project is contained. So there's no sharp and pointy ends sticking out. The elastic keeps it under enough tension that it holds the 2 little blocks together. And now I can pop this into my project bag and not be at risk of impaling myself, which is very important. Super handy. I'm so excited to have found these. I don't know why I'm so excited about these little project caps. Because I normally work with magic loop, I just always take the 2 ends of my circular and then poke them into the yarn ball. And so I've never really been concerned about poking myself with circular needles, but with DPNs, for some reason, these ones are extra pointy and feel extra dangerous. So having these project caps makes me feel a lot safer. If you were at Knit City that weekend, you probably would have seen me walking around with this setup. And so this is what I talked about on the previous episode when we were talking about socks and knitting from a double sock blank. So you can see here is my double sock blank, and there are 2 strands of yarn coming out from this. And what I did was I basically cast on for 2 socks on one long circular needle. And so I'm knitting 2 socks. They call them 2 at a time, T-A-A-T. 2 at a time, 2 at a time, T-A-A-T. Knitting socks, T-A-A-T. Many people in the comments of the last video were saying that they knit socks from 2 at a time. So while I was at Knit City, I had some people come and ask me how I set up my socks on one needle and how I did all this. And so basically what I did was I cast on, I'm making 60 stitches around, so I cast on 60 stitches with one end, and then just continued on, picked up the other ball of yarn or the other end of yarn, and then cast on another set of 60. And then I basically knit ribbing, 1 by 1 ribbing across each of those cast on bits. And then after knitting 1 row, in order to sort of give it a bit of structure and stability to that cast on edge, then I folded the first one in half and then started with magic loop, and then folded the second one in half and continued on that way. And so the way that my needles are oriented is where my 2 socks are like so, and my needles sort of start in the middle, in between these 2 sets of socks. So it looks a little bit weird right now because I'm basically turning the heel right now, so you can't see a lot of what I'm doing, but I'm basically knitting around 1 sock, and then when I get to the end of that sock, then I pick up the other strand for the second sock, and then I knit around and around and around. And I find that there's no way for me to really mess up and knit more rounds on one sock than the other sock. There's just a natural movement to the yarn, so I'm constantly picking up the right strand, and it seems pretty obvious which one I'm supposed to be working on. So far, so good. So far, I haven't messed up anything. But the really convenient thing about working with the double sock blank is that didn't have to wind it into a ball, didn't have to separate it or anything, and I literally just tucked it under my arm, and then I was walking around the show and knitting on my 2 socks at the same time. And then just whenever I needed to, just pull a little bit more yarn out and then keep walking, keep talking, and keep knitting. So that is really convenient. If you don't want to hold it under your arm, if this is going to cause some shoulder strain, then you could wear like your project bag, or hang your project bag off of your arm and then just have this popped into your project bag. So it's just very convenient. Now, I have heard of people doing all sorts of different ways of casting on for their 2 at a time socks. Lots of different ways that you can do it. I just found a way that worked for me and just went with it. So that is basically it for today, just catching up about the socks that I'm knitting. I feel very confident that I'll be able to finish these socks at the very least before the end of the month. So I'll have 2 pairs of socks done for Socktober. And yeah, just practicing more with the DPNs, getting more used to that feeling, because it feels a little bit different having to juggle all these needle tips. So if you have any suggestions or tips on how you handle DPNs, I'm totally open to hearing about it. DPNs have never really been my thing. If you are interested in signature needles at all, we do have them for a limited time in the studio, or in the shop too. We'll have them online in the shop, and we're not going to have them forever, but we'll have them for a little bit. And I will definitely have more and more things to share next week when we talk about weaving. I'm going to talk about my weaving twill class. I'm going to talk about Laura and what we learned with Laura this past week, and just so many things are happening here at the studio right now, and just so many things to share with you. So thank you for being here today. If you like this episode, please do hit the like button, and if you would like to see more content like this, please do hit subscribe. And we come here almost every Friday talking about something to do with yarn and color. So thanks so much for being here. I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.